So sometimes the bees don't have quite enough honey to last until spring, and that may be because the beekeeper took too much, or it could just mean we had a little bit longer of a winter than we'd really expected. It's happened before, and you just didn't quite judge it right. You weren't expecting it to last as long. So maybe you need to feed a little bit just to get them to that foraging stage. The winters in northeastern North Carolina are typically very mild. We don't really get a whole lot of snow. We may get like 1 or 2 snowfalls a year, but even those, maybe a couple of inches. We like to put a candy board on our hives during the winter, and this is really just an insurance. It's an insurance policy for us. It makes us feel a little bit better about our bees and the health of them. We do add pollen substitute to that candy board, and that's because we leave honey and pollen for them when we do our harvest. We make sure we leave plenty for them. However, as they're eating through all of those stores and they're moving up and they're moving up and they're eating more, well, by that time, it should be spring and they should be flying and foraging and doing great things. However, if that winter does, extend a little more than we'd planned, then that pollen is going to help stimulate the queen to produce brood. And so it's just going to kind of ramp up that spring process and get all of the bees ready for foraging, because we're going to have more brood, which means more bees, which means more bees can go out and bring in that forage. We like to feed sugar syrup before the nectar flow because we've got a bunch of new supers. It happens. And we need those bees to draw the wax out for us. And we would prefer the bees do it using sugar syrup instead of honey. We don't want to lose that honey harvest. I mean, kind of selfish as beekeepers, but it's the truth. We'd rather them use that sugar syrup because it does take about 7 pounds of honey to make a pound of wax. That's a lot. And that's honey that you're losing. So if we give them the sugar syrup, that's going to ramp it up. And again, that also helps when we feed that 1-to-1 sugar syrup in the spring. It kind of stimulates the nectar flow. So it's going to ramp up that production and get them ready for when the flowers do start blooming to get out there and get at it. Now, some of our inner covers, you'll see a screen over the hole, and some of them it's just a hole. A lot of people have screens over their holes so they can look into the hives and not worry about bees pouring out of the inner covers. We haven't really had that issue. Maybe 1 or 2 will peek out. But we noticed that when the screen was there, the bees were having a harder time getting at the sugar syrup that we had in there. We do have a couple that have screens over them still, and that's because if we want to feed pollen patty, we can just press that pollen patty down into the screen and the bees can get at it that way. We put an empty hive body over our jars when we do in-hive feeding. We use a mason jar, so we'll put that over the hole in the inner cover and then cover it with just an empty brood box. And that's just to help protect the jar from, we get some pretty serious winds here. We don't want that jar knocking down and then you have an open hole right on top of your winter cluster or just the bees in general, and now they're just getting rained on. We don't want that. Some documentation will tell you that certain species of bees overwinter better than others. I'm not a scientist. I can't say whether that's true or not. However, my belief is that local bees, local mutts, if you'll call them that, a lot of genetic diversity going on in there, they tend to survive better. They're bred for the area already, so they're used to the weather that they're seeing. Some of our hives, we put painter's tape around them, and that's just when we need to crack boxes open or when we switch out a winter inner cover for a summer inner cover that has a feeder hole, and we've broken that propolis seal. That's another way the wind, the rain can get in and affect the bees, and we really don't want that. So we'll just put the painter's tape around just that little bit where we broke the seal. The wind and the rain and everything, not to get into the hive. And also robbing. If we're feeding internally, we have that mason jar inside the hive with the bees. We don't want anything else getting at that sugar syrup. We want just the bees getting at it. And if we have just a little bit of a crack, maybe ants are getting there. Or wasps.
Your hands? Did they get you? Sorry.
You can definitely get stung this early in the spring. I just got stung 2 days ago. We were putting on the sugar syrup, took the insulated inner cover off, put the summer feeder inner cover on. I was getting some pictures, looking really good, and right there, just got me. Didn't have gloves on because I wasn't really doing any kind of manipulation with the bees. Didn't think I needed it. Serves me right. It'll happen. The bees will kind of peek up in between the frames when you get in there to start looking around, whether you're doing an inspection or you're just switching out inner covers. And that's just because you just took the roof off their house. They want to know what's going on. They're like, whoa, hold on a second. It was nice and dark and warm in here, and you just took off my entire roof. What's going on? And when we're feeding sugar syrup in the springtime, it's a 1-to-1 mixture. And we'll put about a quart on about every week. And we'll just check typically every Monday or so and refill as needed. So how do you know that you need to stop feeding? Well, you definitely want to stop before the flow starts, but the bees will really tell you. They'll just stop getting at it. They're like, hey, we don't need this anymore. We got this filet mignon over here instead of your hot dogs. We don't want that anymore.